Welcome back into the Vandy Sports Podcast on the 440 Sports Network. I'm your host, Billy Derrick, alongside Joey Dwyer, football contributor Will. We're coming at you with another football episode, and we are predicting the season. We are laying out our final records for Vanderbilt, what we think this team is going to do this season. And so, that's pretty much all we're doing today. I know there's some news and nuggets to get to. I'm sure we'll get to some of that later in the week with the Roundtable podcast, and then we'll reconvene, of course, before the Virginia Tech game week 1. But I do want to touch on our sponsors, the Wash House. Log on to washhouseclean.com, Murfreesboro Pure Milk Company, Sutherland and Belk, and the Maynard Nexon Government Contracts Group. Go give the podcast a review and a 5-star rating. That helps us get noticed. Also, if you're interested in sponsoring the show, being a part of our football coverage, email Chris Lee at chrislee70@gmail.com and help us help you guys with the best Vanderbilt coverage there is. So again, we appreciate everybody listening, but we want to add to that, and we want to sustain this great product. So again, chrislee70@gmail.com. All right. Again, we've got Joey, we've got Will, football contributor, and we're going to dive into this schedule. And initially here, guys, we're going to give our initial thoughts of this schedule as it pops up on the screen. I know not for audio listeners, but if you're watching on YouTube, obviously starts out with Virginia Tech. Those next 2 games, I think everybody's predicting Vanderbilt to win. And then you get a little 3-game gauntlet at Missouri, Alabama at home, and then at Kentucky. Then you get a respite with Ball State. And then the final 5 games could determine Clark Lee's tenure and the fate, really, if you look at it. I think Auburn and South Carolina are the 2 winnable games there down the stretch. You could argue at Kentucky, guys, but Joey, I'll start with you. Just kind of first glance at this schedule, and even take me back to, a couple of months ago when we finally, or however long ago it was, when we finally got the first look at this. What comes to mind? Because obviously it's there's nothing easy about it.
Yeah, first of all, I thought it was pretty freaking tough. I mean, look at the SEC schedule. Missouri, Alabama, there's 2 top 15 teams. I think Kentucky's going to be, I don't know if they're going to be better than they were last year, but I think they've got some real talent. Texas, a top 5 team. Auburn's pretty freaking hard to beat at Jordan-Hare. Vanderbilt has really struggled with South Carolina over the years. I think that's probably their most winnable game, and I think we'll probably agree on that. At least in SEC play, it's their most winnable game against a Power 5 team. LSU at Death Valley is pretty freaking hard to beat, and Tennessee obviously has given them fits recently, and I think is just better roster than them. You look at the schedule, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 top 15 teams on there. It's a tall task for them, and I do like the approach that they've had with trying to be different than those teams, because I think they figured out last year you can't just line up chalk against those teams and beat them. But man, guys, we've seen the schedule, and it's kind of stared us down for months. And even Virginia Tech, I think, is better than people had thought they were going to be when the schedule originally came out. They've got a lot of really tough games. They got 9 games that I would guess they're going to be double-digit underdogs in, and we'll get into whether we think they could actually do it or which teams we think they have the best odds against. But it just looks like you're looking up at a mountain when you look at that schedule initially.
Well,
on the surface, it doesn't look good, boys, honestly. It does not look good. But honestly, when you look at this schedule and then you look at the 2022 Vanderbilt schedule, which we obviously don't have pulled up, I think the difficulty is very close. And if you went back to 2022 after the 2021 season, I don't think anyone would have thought we would win 5 games on that schedule. I mean, we had to run the gauntlet of playing I think it was Georgia, Alabama, and Ole Miss 3 weeks. That was we played 3 weeks in a row. So that was a very tough schedule also. Virginia Tech is obviously a tough non-con game, just like Wake Forest was for us, right? We couldn't beat Wake Forest in the I know we played them 2 years, but maybe 3 years in the Clark Lee tenure. I know definitely 2 seasons in 2022 and 2023. But nonetheless, Virginia Tech kind of feels like maybe a better version of that 2022 Wake Forest team. I'm not sure yet. They obviously have a lot of returning starters, but guys, in the transfer portal era, that really doesn't mean as much as it used to, because normally if most teams are adding people or players constantly to try to improve their team. So I wouldn't just say that all their starters returning, or a good portion of them, automatically means they're going to be really good, because all these other teams are adding players every year to get even better than they were the previous season. This is going to be an interesting season. The three other non-con games, they should win those. I know we'll delve into that a little deeper, but yeah, on the surface level, this looks brutal. But we're going to see if the changes made this offseason is going to make a difference, because if you compare the schedule to 2022, they won 5 games and they've got more resources than they did back then. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens.
Yeah, the thing that stands out to me, guys, before we get into our predictions, instead of Arkansas and Mississippi State, Vanderbilt got Alabama and LSU out of the West, right? And so, but like for Tennessee, for example, they've got a beautiful looking schedule. They get Arkansas, they get Mississippi State. So, yeah, Vanderbilt got jobbed here. I think we all know that. But so did Oklahoma. So did Florida. This is the SEC. This is the new age of the SEC. And, maybe next year we're looking at it and going, man, Vanderbilt has an easier schedule, and we might be. But also, it's Vanderbilt. It's pretty rare to look at a schedule and go, man, feel really good about it. I think we're gonna roll through this. Like that's pretty rare as well. But tough schedule nonetheless. And we're gonna go in order of I guess not newest member, but we are going to start with Will, our football contributor here. And Will, I'm going to show this graphic again. If you're listening on the podcast version, just follow along and make sure you guys are clear about who you're picking to win. But we're going to start with Will. Go ahead.
Okay, so week 1, it's going to be a tough game, right? Virginia Tech. We really don't know what this team's made of. Obviously, you and Joey have been giving good coverage at practice, letting us know what's happening. And it's a lot of concern on offense, right? Defense looks good, but you got to score points to win games. So I think that's going to be a cause for concern. I don't think they're going to figure it out in week 1, and I think we're going to lose. And you just want me to run down the whole thing?
Yeah.
Okay. Alcorn State, that's a game they should easily win, right? I mean, come on. Does that even need a breakdown? If we lose to Alcorn State, it's a wrap, right? The season's over. Sound the alarms. Put your 2-week notices in. Just shut down the athletic department. Georgia State, I think that should be a win. You and Joey and I were talking about this before the show started. Georgia State is picked to finish like dead last, right, in the Sun Belt. So they're not a very good team. So that's the teams you have to take care of. You can't have any slip-ups like you did against UNLV last year. Now, UNLV turned out to be a good team, but you have to win your non-conference games in the SEC, or you have no chance of making a bowl game, especially if you're Vanderbilt. Missouri obviously was a very good team last year, a fringe team to make the playoffs. Would have made the playoffs if it was the current format of the 12 teams. So they're going to be scary. They're probably going to blow us out. Alabama, they hired a new coach in DeBoer, Kalen DeBoer, if I'm not mistaken, had a lot of success at Washington. Went to the national championship, lost to Michigan. So even though they had a lot of players leave, I think it's going to be business as usual. Alabama's probably going to roll again, and they're going to probably, beat us pretty bad. Now Kentucky, this is where I think we could kind of compete and possibly sneak an SEC win out, because Kentucky has kind of struggled the last couple years. They've had they kind of have this revolving door of transfer quarterbacks. They had Will Levis, and then last year they had Leary from NC State to transfer, and now they have is it Vandenberg? I think Vandegrift, right? Vandegrift from Georgia. So we don't know if he's going to be any good. I think we could definitely beat Kentucky. Kentucky doesn't scare me at all. That's when we can start to talk about maybe a team we could sneak a win out of. And then Ball State is a team, obviously they play in the MAC. We should that's Joey Lynch's alma mater. So we got to beat him for that, just because, obviously the bad omen we had from that whole experiment. But I think we should easily beat Ball State. Texas is a team that has a lot of returning starters. Quinn Ewers is a very good quarterback, probably might even be the first pick in the draft when it's all said and done after the 2024 season. They're going to beat us pretty handily. I don't think there's any chance. Now, this is another game at Auburn that I thought we might be able to sneak a win, just because we saw what New Mexico State could do last year against Auburn. They beat them 31-10, if I'm not mistaken. Jerry Kill and Tim Beck were responsible, and Diego Pavia were responsible for helping them pull off that upset win. And obviously, New Mexico State has more talent than, I'm sorry, Vanderbilt has more talent than New Mexico State. At least you would hope, right? If they don't, we're in trouble. I think that's a team that we possibly could sneak a win. We could get a win out of that, but I'm gonna chalk it up as a loss because I think inevitably we will lose that game. Now, on November 9th, we play South Carolina. South Carolina is a team that I honestly believe between Vandy and South Carolina could be the worst team in the SEC. I think Shane Beamer is on the hot seat. I don't think they're a very good team. From what I've heard, their NIL is behind significantly, even further behind than Vandy, which is crazy to think about, guys. So I think that South Carolina could give Vandy a run for their money for the worst team in the SEC, and I think that they could win that game, which would put us at 5 wins, 5-6, right? LSU going to beat the doors off of us. If I'm not mistaken, Billy Nussmeier is going to be starting at quarterback this year, and he's really good. I know that was a quarterback that you and I were wanted for Vanderbilt to possibly try to get if he entered the portal this offseason, but LSU is always loaded in talent. They're gonna beat us probably pretty handedly. And then finally, now this is where it gets crazy, guys. Hold on to your chairs. I believe Tennessee is overrated. They have a very easy schedule, but nobody knows what Nico is as a quarterback. Everybody's overhyping him. I don't know if he can make it through a full SEC season being 6'6", 195 pounds. I don't think he can take the hits, and we don't even know if he's good to begin with. I think if Tennessee is having a bad season, and by bad season, I just mean their fan base is losing their mind and they're 7-4 or 6-5, and Vanderbilt is 5-6. I think we could have an upset win, kind of like we did in 2016 when Vanderbilt beat Tennessee to prevent them from going to the Sugar Bowl. When Tennessee was 8-3 going into that game, and Vandy was 5-6, we beat them. We went to a bowl game, and I think something like that can happen once again. So, and keep in mind, guys, this is my best case scenario. I don't know if I prefaced that before I started talking about it. I think our best case scenario is we go 6-6, and that's how we get there.
Interesting. All right, Joey, you're on the clock.
Yeah, I think this is Will's got the optimistic prediction. I've got kind of the chalk consensus prediction from like the national side of it. And this is what I believe too. I think Virginia Tech's going to be a loss. I think experience really helps. And I think they're a bad matchup for Vandy with just how physical they are on the defensive line, how experienced they are, how much continuity they have. And Vanderbilt doesn't seem to have that at this point, and that's not necessarily their fault. It's just kind of how the matchup plays. I just don't see that being a great matchup for Virginia Tech. I think Virginia Tech could really exploit their corners. I think they could probably do some things to them on the offensive line. I don't know. I might probably lean Virginia Tech to even cover the 13-point spread for that game, to be quite honest with you. Alcorn State, they should totally beat. I did notice that in the SWAC preseason poll, Alcorn State was first in their division. I still think Vanderbilt should take them to town. I mean, look at the Alabama A&M game last year and how Vanderbilt was able to rotate defensive and offensive linemen against Alabama A&M, and how Alabama A&M just had so few bodies to compete with it. That's kind of what I view with Alcorn State. It's just, even if they keep up for a little bit like Alabama A&M did last year, and I do think they're probably better than Alabama A&M was last year, I just think Vanderbilt's got too many bodies and too much ability to lose that game or really even have it be a close game. They should win that game pretty handily. I think we all agree upon that. That's a game that they should have no trouble with. Georgia State, I think they're going to win that game by more than most people think they're going to win that game by 2. A lot of people are probably going to see the line and maybe freak out a little bit because it's on the road. It's at Turner Field. I think that game, the line might be closer than the game's actually going to be. Georgia State, they are the second least, or the team with the second least amount of votes in the Sun Belt, second least amount of points or whatever their system is. They're supposed to be last in their division. My question to anybody who thinks they're going to lose to Georgia State, and maybe I could look dumb for saying this in a few months, would Sean Elliott really – the situation with Sean Elliott, unless it took a drastic turn, I think was pretty similar over the years. Why would he leave Georgia State if he thought that was a team capable of being an SEC team? After spring ball, I don't know that would have been the case. They should win that game, and if they don't, I think there's real trouble brewing on West End. Missouri, I think, is a game that they're going to lose. I do wonder how good Missouri's actually going to be. Brady Cook, I think, really thrived with a good running game last year, and I'm just not sure how good their running game is going to be. I'm not advanced on that subject or anything, but I do wonder what their offense looks like relative to what it was. They have too many playmakers. I just don't think Vanderbilt can hang with them. Same with Alabama. I don't think that really needs any prefacing there. That puts them at what, 2-3. Kentucky, I just don't see it. I think that's one of the more winnable games on the schedule. I just think Kentucky's got a lot of talent, and I would have to believe it when I see it. I'm not saying that one's impossible because I don't think that's a crazy environment. Vanderbilt's won there before. That's one of Clark Lee's 2 SEC wins, so it's possible, but I would bet on Kentucky for now. I think it was a really smart move by Clark Lee to schedule Ball State instead of SMU. I think he could have got himself into some real trouble if they went 2-10 again, but scheduling Ball State and kind of scheduling in a third win I think is going to be really helpful. They were 8 out of 12 in the MAC in the preseason poll. Good move by him to schedule that game. And again, they have more bodies than Ball State has. I would think that they win that game just based off of a talent perspective. Ball State's not any mid-major team that's going to blow you away. And that's what I want to preface too. Last year, they made the mistake of scheduling UNLV, a team that was a bowl team and had bodies, had athletes. I think they are able to pretty significantly outman all these 3 teams next year. And they also went to Vegas to play that game too. So I think they were smarter with the way they scheduled their non-conference this year. They have the Virginia Tech game to where if they really believe in what they've got, then they can go try to make a statement that game to show off the stadium, show off the progress the program has made if they really believe that's the case. Do I believe that they're going to win that game? No, but I just look at it and say that's probably a smart decision to say maybe that's a we arrived game. I don't know that they have arrived, but if they want to make that statement, they can. Texas, I think, is a loss, as Will kind of outlined there. Auburn, I think, is one of the more attainable games on the schedule. It's just so freaking hard to win it. Jordan Hare, New Mexico State did it, and maybe Auburn kind of has that in the back of their head. Tim Beck seems to have an idea, but I think they switched defensive coordinators, and I'm not super optimistic that they go in there and win that one. South Carolina, that's their most winnable SEC game, I think, no question. They should have a chance in that game, and I'd be disappointed for them if they weren't in that game in the fourth quarter. I think they have enough in terms of their offense and kind of slowing the game down to where it should be close. And they should have more close games this year. I want to preface that as well. I don't think a completely 3-9 looks terrible on the surface, but a completely unsuccessful year is last year where you get blown out every SEC game. I'm not sure if that's going to be the case this year. I do have some questions about their ball security still, because if they want to run a ball security offense where they slow it down, that's going to be important. And they've turned it over more than I would have hoped this fall, I think. But I don't know. I just have some questions about that scheme, but if it works, I think they could be a team that stays in some games. LSU is a game I don't expect them to stay in. Even if there's injuries, even whatever, I think LSU is going to beat them pretty handily. And I know people are going to hate this, but I think Tennessee is going to do the same thing. I think Joe Milton was worse than a lot of people had thought and had his best career game against Vandy last year. And at that point in the year, I think Vandy might be beat up a little bit. And I think it's just going to be tough. The strength and conditioning program will probably help them stay healthier than they were at that point last year, but it's a tough schedule for them, and they could be twice as good, 3 times as good, and they could still win 3 games in my mind, and that's just the harsh reality of it. I mean, they're good people. I like the changes they made this offseason, but I'm going to have to believe it to see that they've made enough progress to be an SEC team. I like the way Clark constructed the non-conference schedule. But other than that, here's the thing about Vandy getting a tough draw. Obviously, they got a tough draw, right? I think it kind of goes back to what I talked about with Jerry Stackhouse. You're going to get a tough draw, and you're going to have a tough look in the computers because you're Vanderbilt and you don't look in the computers. So naturally, you're going to have a tougher draw than most teams. So it's just kind of where I stand on it. I think they're going to have a really difficult time. But I think it'd be a whole lot of fun to cover if they didn't. I just am not optimistic at this point, if not.
All right. Here we go. I'm going to wrap it up. All right. So I'm kind of in the middle of Joey and Will here, at least in win-loss predictions. I think we're all fairly similar through the first 6 games. I think we have the same predictions there. I've got a loss to Virginia Tech. The thing about Virginia Tech, it's at 11 a.m. It's week 1. Neither team is probably thrilled about playing each other. Virginia Tech is probably not excited about facing a Tim Beck, Jerry Kill offense with Diego Pavia. But Pavia is the only guy that probably really scares Virginia Tech as well. So there's going to be a ton on Pavia, just like the entire season. There's going to be a lot on Pavia's shoulders. I don't think in week 1 he'll have enough to shoulder it. I think that game's close, and I might even pick Vandy to cover just because of how low scoring and how much improved the defense can be. I still want to see how good the defense can be, but Virginia Tech is interesting to me. I don't think they get it done. The next couple of games, Alcorn State and Georgia State, I think are wins. Alcorn, I know they have a pretty good quarterback, but that should not be a game. And if it is, like you said, Joey, that there's trouble brewing. And I want to preface this review with this as well, guys. I'm almost more interested in seeing how Vanderbilt fares against the 3 non-conference teams as opposed to your Alabama, Texas, and LSU of the world. Like, can you go out and dominate all 3 of those teams? If you can, okay, let's go see what you can do against a Kentucky and Auburn and South Carolina. But if you don't, then there's really no belief. So I am very, as sad as this sounds, I'm interested. I'm interested to see how they fare at Georgia State. They're not very good, but still got to go, into a unique atmosphere at Turner Field, which I'm interested in checking out. Should be a win though. At Mizzou, not your Mizzou from a few years ago. Unfortunately for Vanderbilt, that's another thing about this. Mizzou and Tennessee are 2 East teams that were down at one point just 4 or 5 years ago, and now they're back up top. So at Mizzou is going to be tough. I think they're going to be really good again. Alabama at home, that's a loss. I don't think Alabama is the Nick Saban Alabama, but they're still going to be really good. They're going to be physical, and Vanderbilt's not going to have enough. I don't think they'll be as beat up. Remember, Will, in one of those Derrick Mason years, they started out the year 2-0. You play Alabama, and they were just beat up the rest of the season. And
we were 3-0 actually, because I remember
3-0. Okay, yeah.
Nephi Lalau was talking about how we want Bama, and then the wheels. It was 2017. I think we started the season off like 3-0, and he said we want Bama, and then we literally went like 2-7 the rest of the season.
just fell apart. So I'm not scared about that happening. I don't think Alabama and Texas are on the schedule, and those are probably 2 playoff teams. But I think Vanderbilt, like you said, Joe, with the strength and conditioning, can survive an injury or 2. They don't need several, especially to key players. But again, I think Alabama at home is a loss. At Kentucky, I think will be interesting. Not sure how good Vandegrift is going to be. I do still really like Kentucky. I think they're physical up front with Deion Walker. They still have Barryon Brown and some other good targets. Don't think Vanderbilt goes up there and wins. Coming home to Ball State, again, another game. I'm interested to see how they fare, how they stack up. Can you go out and dominate? I think they should, and I think they will. Texas, of course, same thing as Alabama. You guys have hit on it with Quinn Ewers and all the talent they have. I don't think Vanderbilt has a shot. At Auburn, this is where I start to think about a win. Like you said, Will, Diego Pavia, Tim Beck, Jerry Kill, Eli Stowers, they all went down there. Jamani Jones actually had a good game if you go back and watch the film in that game with some short yardage plays. That's why I would pick Vanderbilt in this to win. But I think with the new DC at Auburn, like you said, Joey, and Auburn will not let that happen again. I mean, there's no way they let that happen. I could be totally wrong. There's familiarity there with Vanderbilt, of course, and I think it's probably close. But Auburn, I think, will be better. They got a really good freshman receiver, and so I think, and Hugh Freeze always improves with his teams. At Auburn, it will be tough, so I got that as a loss. But South Carolina, again, this was hard for me to pick because Vanderbilt hasn't beaten South Carolina in something like 15 years. But it's at home. It's late in the season. South Carolina could be a train wreck. Like you said, Will, I think there is big-time potential for South Carolina to fall apart. Who knows? Maybe Beamer isn't even coaching the Gamecocks at that point. That's probably a little dramatic, but I think that'll probably I think that will probably, if the season goes off the rails, this game could be the game that does it. And I think Vanderbilt pulls through and gets it done. I think with all the changes they made in the offseason, whether it's Jerry Kill, Tim Beck, Pavia. I think they will do just enough on offense in that game. And I'll say this too, in at least one SEC game. And I might even factor in Virginia Tech to that, lump them in, because they're basically an SEC type opponent. But I think with all the changes and Clark as the defensive coordinator, I think they will get to 4. It's not going to be easy, and I was close to picking them going 3-9, but I do think they get it done against South Carolina. Again, not the biggest Shane Beamer fan. I don't think he's as good of a coach as a lot of people might think. He does pull out wins late in the season. That, man, where did that come from? But I do think Vanderbilt gets it done. A couple of years ago, they should have gotten it done. They let a grad student quarterback step on the field and beat them. So I do have them beating South Carolina and getting to 4 at LSU at night. That's in that night window. Good luck. It'll be fun for the players to experience, but who knows who's out at that point. And then Tennessee at home. I think that could be more interesting than the last couple years, but I still think the matchup has never been good under Clark Lee against Tennessee. Tennessee is just, they really do a good job of exposing Vanderbilt. Last year it was in the run game, and then the year before that, it was honestly in the run game too. So they're bigger, they're more physical. But I can see best case scenario for me is probably 6-6. All things go right. I wouldn't have them. I don't know if I'd have them beating Tennessee, but I would have them likely beating Auburn and maybe even Virginia Tech at that point. But Joey, I can also see your result happening. A 3-9 type season for this team. So that's what I've got. I've got Vanderbilt getting to 4, 4-8 overall, and Clark Lee keeping his job. Joey has Vanderbilt going 3-9. Will 6-6, and in a bowl game for Clark Lee. That would be a statement, man.
Well, I want to say too, though, that if Joey's schedule prediction is correct, I think that we're heading into the offseason looking for a new coach. I don't think you can sell any of these boosters who are already skeptical about the program and other things we won't get into. I think it's going to be really hard to sell them on keeping Clark Lee for a 5th year when his record is 2-10, 5-7, 2-10, 3-9. That doesn't boost confidence. Nobody's going to have faith in him at that point. I know he just signed an extension after 2022. You would expect after 2 years that buyout or whatever it would be is going to obviously be lower just with more time passing by. And in your case scenario, Billy, I think he will get another year just to prove himself, go into year 5, see what can happen, try to build off of it. In my case scenario, he probably gets another extension and probably a nice pay raise if he goes 6-6 and makes a bowl game, because it'd be our first bowl game since 2018. So I feel like there's going to be something that happens with each one of our record prediction is going to determine Clark Lee's future with the program.
Joey, any parting thoughts?
Yeah, I think 2 is the bar. I think he's got to get 2 to keep his job. Or I would say he's got to get 3 to keep his job. If he gets 2, I think it gets a little dicey. I just think they're going to do anything they can to let Clark keep his job with the way they handled the whole stack thing. They probably don't want to pay another buyout. I think they've given Clark a tough hand over the years with obviously the NIL thing, which I think some of that falls on him as well. The stadium thing has obviously been tough for him. I just think it's tough to sell the job to the next guy with all that Clark has kind of been through here. And it's not making an excuse for him because the results should be better by now. You've got to be able to innovate better than he did at points, but I just have a hard time seeing them move on at this point. I think he stands for everything they want to stand for as a university. I think he's good with the right people. And I think that here's the thing about next year too. This is not the thing that's not going for him and wouldn't be going for Vanderbilt with a new coach anyway. Isn't the schedule like dang near the same in SEC play next year? I mean, that is killer for them moving forward.
Yeah, they've got, I think, Alabama and Texas both on the road, I want to say, next year. And then obviously Tennessee on the road. And I think basically they're flipped to an extent. I'll have to take another look at it. But you're right, Joey. It's not going to get any easier in the SEC, and that's what we're trying to get at. Is Clark the guy? I want to believe it, right? I think a lot of people want to believe it. We're all fans of Clark and the staff. But at the end of the day, it's a business. It's a win-loss business, and Vanderbilt has to has to get to at least 3 this year. I think we can agree on that. But I think your point stands, even if it's 2, and this feels sad saying it. It's just the state of affairs at Vanderbilt. You just paid over $20 million to Jerry Stackhouse to leave, and you're shelling out more money just with expenses as a whole as well. It's going to be tough to have to do that again. So they will give him all the room for error. I just think even at 2-10, that would be an abject disaster. That means you lose to one of your 3 non-conference opponents, and that would be tough to retain him.
I want to say this too, real quick. If Vanderbilt goes 2-10, not only do I think we're going to have a coaching search, I think we're going to have an AD search as well. I don't think Candace can keep her job after having a historically bad basketball season where she gave Jerry Stackhouse an extension for some reason that he didn't deserve, and then having to pay this crazy buyout for him. And then the next season of football going 2-10, I don't think she can defend that record with Daniel Diermeyer, whoever is making the call on her job security. So I think if we go 2-10, she will be fired and Clark will be fired. And the main reason I say that, guys, and I totally agree, the 2-10 maybe would have kept Clark's job in years past because of the complacency that's bred at Vanderbilt. But the difference is that they got $7 million to spend on this roster, which puts them in the top 12 in the SEC to help them compete this year. And if you spend $7 million on your roster just to finish with the same record that you did the year before when you spent 0, how is any booster going to give you any more money when they said, I gave you $7 million and there was literally no quality improvement whatsoever?
That's a good point. It's a good point. It's a put up or shut up year for Vanderbilt. Can they do it? We'll see. Either way, we've got our predictions. Will's got the Doors going 6-6. Joey's
best
got
case scenario, though. Preface that you're going to make people think
best
I'm crazy.
Best
case scenario. Yeah.
So yeah, I mean 4-8. I guess I did this wrong, and maybe either way, those are 3 different perspectives of the schedule that I think people appreciate, and hopefully we got different perspectives out there. And that'll wrap it up. We got the Roundtable podcast coming up later this week. We will reconvene us 3 at some point before Virginia Tech. Next week's game week. Vanderbilt, Virginia Tech, which is crazy to think about, but we will have all kinds of coverage that week leading up. And again, we'll get a podcast out early next week, getting our thoughts of the matchup, and we'll have another roundtable as well. But again, don't forget, if you want to be a part of our coverage and help us continue this coverage of Vanderbilt sports, if you're interested in sponsoring the show, email Chris Lee at chrislee70@gmail.com. Go subscribe to our Vandy Sports YouTube channel as well. Thanks for listening. For Joey Dwyer and Will, I'm Billy Derrick. We'll catch you again soon with more episodes of the Vandy Sports Podcast.